Imagine for a moment a world where someone reached into the minds of every newborn and quietly stole a portion of their cognitive potential. This is not the premise of a dark fairy tale or a dystopian novel, but a brutal reality buried beneath the suffocating scent of burning fuel. For the better part of the 20th century, the entire human race was forced to participate in a chemical experiment of unprecedented scale. As you walked down the street, every breath you drew was delivering a lethal heavy metal directly into your delicate nervous system. This invisible chain did more than just quietly lower the global average IQ. It etched a permanent mark of toxicity into the very gears of our phones, our cars, and the foundation of modern civilization. Today, we are going to unlock the history of this leaded chain that has constricted the human brain for over 60 years, exploring the era when progress was measured in poison and convenience came at the cost of our collective future. We must ask ourselves, in our relentless pursuit of a smoother engine and a faster world, what part of our humanity did we leave behind in the smog? In the vibrant decade of the 1920s, the burgeoning automobile industry was haunted by a persistent and violent ghost known as engine knock. This was a destructive vibration that echoed like a scream from the iron bowels of early internal combustion engines, threatening to shatter the very machines built to carry humanity into the future. It was then that a modern alchemist named Thomas Midgley Jr. discovered a seemingly miraculous elixir, Tetraethyllead. Within the walls of his shadowy laboratory, he found that adding just a few drops of this liquid could instantly tame the most turbulent fuels, turning the chaotic rattling of metal into a smooth rhythmic hum. It was a chemical triumph of the highest order, but this miracle harbored a dark, unspoken secret. To ensure this invention would be embraced by the unsuspecting public, corporate giants deliberately stripped away the word lead, a name synonymous with ancient toxicity, and replaced it with the soft, elegant, and seemingly harmless title of Ethyl. Thus, this cursed essence began to flow through the veins of the world like a finely packaged piece of lethal candy. In an era intoxicated by the illusion of infinite progress, people toasted to this marriage of industry and chemistry, blissfully unaware that this brilliant solution was actually a delayed death sentence. They welcomed the convenience of a quieter ride, never suspecting that the ethyl they praised was a Trojan horse designed to quietly compromise the health of the entire planet for decades to come. Before ethyl gasoline ever graced the public streets, a terrifying rehearsal for hell was already unfolding in the secretive depths of the DuPont factory. This facility was known to the outside world as the Standard Laboratory, but for the workers trapped inside, it was a breeding ground for living nightmares. As lead vapors accumulated in the stagnant air, a horrific phenomenon known as lead palsy, or the Loony Gas, began to spread like a psychic plague. This was not a simple physical decay, but a complete collapse of the human spirit. Workers began to hallucinate giant, multi-legged insects crawling on the walls and heard piercing screams that had no source. They ran through the corridors in blind terror, and some, in a state of total delirium, leaped from high windows to their deaths. Yet, in the face of these atrocities, the alchemist Midgley chose to stage a dangerous piece of theater. In a display of chilling arrogance, he performed a public demonstration where he inhaled the lead vapors himself, claiming with a radiant smile that it was as safe as a morning breeze. He used his own survival as a shield to muffle the agonized cries of the men who were losing their minds behind closed doors. This cold-blooded deception allowed the toxic essence to successfully breach the walls of the laboratory and declare war on the global atmosphere. This rehearsal revealed a brutal truth. For the sake of profit, those in power were willing to turn the entire world into a vast, wall-less asylum, where every breath was a step toward collective madness. But the madness didn't stay behind factory walls. It traveled home in the chalky dust on workers' clothes. It settled in the floorboards where toddlers played. Behind every smooth-running engine was a silent nursery where the bright sparks of curiosity were being quietly extinguished by an invisible fog. We didn't just sacrifice our workers. We mortgaged the cognitive future of our children for a few cents of profit per gallon. As ethyl gasoline swept across the globe, the nightmare that once haunted the laboratory walls was no longer a secret kept in the shadows. Accompanied by the relentless roar of engines, it transformed into a tasteless, colorless, and eternal dust, declaring a silent war on the global atmosphere. This was no longer merely a tragedy for the workers. It became a collective strangulation of the entire human race, targeting specifically those whose brains were still in the delicate stages of development, our children. Lead, this heavy and ancient element, acted as a sinister impostor in the natural order. It perfectly mimicked the essential calcium ions required for neural communication, tricking the brain's sentinels and infiltrating the very core of human intelligence. Once inside, it quietly severed the connections between neural networks, extinguishing the sparks of creative and critical thought before they could even burn bright. Every car speeding down the street, once a symbol of freedom and modern progress, had become a mobile broadcaster of toxicity. These invisible chains drifted through the air, eventually taking root in the minds of countless infants. It was a war fought without smoke or fire, where humanity unknowingly erected a series of global gallows above the cradles of its own offspring. For the sake of a smoother ride and momentary convenience, we were overdrawing the intellectual inheritance of our species. This asphyxia of the mind was slow, precise, and devastating, allowing the potential of an entire generation to evaporate into the smog of burning-laden fuel, leaving a permanent void in the collective consciousness of the 20th century. In the heart of this dark forest shrouded by leaden smog, a scientist named Clair Patterson began a holy war that bordered on obsession. His quest was not for wealth or fame, but for a singular, pure answer: how old is the Earth? However, as he attempted to date ancient meteorites within his laboratory, he discovered a frustrating truth. No matter how meticulously he cleaned, the omnipresent lead dust in the air would inevitably contaminate his samples. To find a baseline of zero pollution, Patterson journeyed to the coldest and most desolate ends of the Earth. Deep within the Antarctic ice, where layers of snow had accumulated for tens of thousands of years, he unearthed a terrifying reality. These ice cores were the Earth's honest diaries, revealing that since the birth of ethyl gasoline, lead levels in the environment had skyrocketed hundreds of times higher than in ancient times. Patterson found himself screaming in a vacuum. To the titans of industry, he wasn't a savior of public health. He was a glitch in the machine of progress. They didn't just attack his data. They tried to erase his existence. Imagine the weight of holding the Earth's honest diary in your hands, while the rest of the world is busy tearing out the pages to feed the furnace of convenience. This was the smoking gun, a piece of evidence that had been systematically suppressed by the powerful. Faced with the threats of oil titans, the withdrawal of research funding, and the cold shoulders of his peers, Patterson stood like a solitary knight guarding a sacred flame. In the frozen wilderness, he raised that blood-stained ice core high, declaring to the world that our so-called progress was built upon the permanent desecration of the Earth's most sacred and pristine sanctuaries, proving that the price of our convenience was the very air we breathe and the legacy we leave behind. Through the tireless crusade of Clair Patterson and many others, the heavy leaded chain was finally shattered by the force of law at the end of the 20th century. Leaded gasoline retreated from the world stage, and the lead levels in the global atmosphere began to decline, appearing on the surface to be a triumphant conclusion to a dark fairy tale. However, as we look down at the Earth beneath our feet and examine the blood in our veins, we discover that those broken links have never truly vanished. They remain settled in the peeling paint of old buildings, buried deep within urban soil, and lingering in the neurological memories of an entire generation. More importantly, this tragedy leaves behind an eternal warning. The human hunger for convenience is often accompanied by a collective blindness toward invisible risks. Today, as we revel in the hyperspeed rotation of our high-tech existence, must we ask if another invisible ethyl is quietly infiltrating our modern lives? Are there new chemical substances, microplastics, or overwhelming digital interferences becoming the brain chains of a new era? The essence of industrial asphyxia has never been about a single specific toxin. Rather, it is our willingness to sacrifice the gears of the future for a momentarily smoother ride, allowing our potential to be strangled by the arrogance of ignorance. This history of alchemical madness is a prophecy we must remember, for while the smog of the past has cleared, the habit of trading our humanity for efficiency remains the most dangerous ghost in our machine. If you are willing to pierce through the smog of progress with us and witness the price tags hidden behind our civilization, please subscribe to The Hidden Cost. Some truths are heavy to bear, but only by seeing them can we cease to be mere sacrifices on the gears of history.